Ryou was a regular teenager who got hit by a truck and was reincarnated into a world full of magic. He got the ability to use water magic and only wanted to live a peaceful life by himself, but he soon becomes the strongest mage in the entire world without even realizing it. Ryou, a 15-year-old boy, suddenly finds himself in a strange white place, and as he wonders what is going on, a tall blonde guy arrives there, telling him that he is dead. Ryou suddenly remembers getting jumped by Truck Kun and asks the blonde dude if he is God. He replies that he is more like an angel who is here to send him to another world. Ryou can't believe that he gets to be Ice Guide, and the angel tells him that he can live as he wants in his next life. Well, Ryou is a chill guy and he just wants to live a slow and peaceful life. The angel has no problem with his choice, and he tells Ryou that the world he will be sent to has magic, and around 20% humans can cast spells. Ryou has talent for water magic, and the angel tells him that he will be dropped at a safe house in the middle of a forest because he opted to live a slow life. There will be enough food to last him for 2 months, and there will be an invisible barrier that will prevent monsters from approaching him. Soon, Ryou wakes up in the house in the middle of the forest, and he immediately heads outside to test out his newfound magic abilities. He then checks out his house that has some frozen meat in a cold room and also an empty bath. There is a knife and 2 beginner-level books on the table that tell him about the monsters and the plants in the area. After that, he heads outside again and experiments with magic, discovering that he can create water just by imagining it, and there is no need to chant any spells. He wants to take a hot bath, but can only create room temperature water, so he decides to start a fire instead. He goes full caveman mode and tries creating fire by rubbing sticks together, but he doesn't have the required skill or strength for that. He gives up, but then he gets an idea to use the sunlight to create fire instead. For that, he decides to create a lens using ice, imagining individual water molecules bonding together as heat is stolen from them, and ultimately succeeds in freezing the water. He then carves the ice into a sphere and uses it as a lens to start a fire. Thanks to that, he can enjoy a hot bath at night, and he realizes that he can create hot water directly if he just applies the principles of modern science to magic. The next day, as he has some dried meat for breakfast, Ryou thinks that he must increase his offensive power because he will need to hunt monsters once he runs out of stored food. He starts by practicing to shoot a water ball at a tree, and even though he can hit his target in the first attempt, it doesn't do any damage. He is not discouraged by that and decides to shoot out a high-pressure water jet because that will have enough power. However, he can't put enough force in the water jet to reach the tree, and it just seems like he is peeing from his hand. Ryou feels like giving up. But then he remembers that the angel told him that the key to using magic is his imagination, and he can get better at it only with regular practice. So Ryou keeps practicing shooting a water jet till he can consistently hit the tree, and at night, he is able to generate hot water directly. The next day, he tries creating ice crystals out of thin air because he has always dreamt of using the Icicle Lance magic spell. However, shooting an icicle is even harder than shooting water, but Ryou keeps practicing it along with his other water magic variations. Days pass, and he becomes more skilled at using water and ice, and one day, he decides to head into the forest to hunt for some food. He explores the beautiful forest and decides to gather some herbs and call it a day, but just then, he notices an angry boar staring at him. Ryou freezes in terror as the boar charges at him, and he barely gets out of its way at the last moment. The boar simply knocks down a tree and Ryou gathers the courage to fight back. He covers the ground in front of the boar with a sheet of ice, making it slip. As the boar slides towards him really fast, Ryou creates multiple sharp icicles pointing towards it at the end of the runway. The boar hits the icicles at full speed and immediately dies after being turned into Swiss cheese. Ryou can't believe that he won, and at night, he checks his book on monsters to find that boars are the weakest kind of monsters. He then notices that even though the book talks about beginner-level monsters, there are 2 special entries at the end. The first one is about dragons, who are powerful enough to burn down entire cities easily, and if one spots them, he should immediately run away. The second page is about demons, who are beings of unknown origin, and the book just tells everyone to pray that they never run into a demon because that means instant game over. Ryou realizes that the world is too big and he needs to get stronger fast, so the next day, he ditches his clothes to go full Tarzan mode and ventures into the forest again. This time, an assassin hawk attacks him and he barely dodges its first attack. The huge bird then sends invisible wind slashes towards him, and Ryou realizes that this monster is way out of his league. He runs away, creating ice blocks behind his back to block the wind slashes, and then shoots water jets at the bird. The assassin hawk dodges everything and then charges towards Ryou at full speed, but he creates an ice wall at the last moment, blocking its attack. The bird loses one of its eyes because of the collision, and it decides to retreat this time, much to Ryou's relief. However, while he was running away from the hawk, Ryou lost his sense of direction. As he tries reaching his house, he suddenly finds a glowing lake with a headless knight standing on the water's surface along with a headless horse. Ryou is stunned to see this, and then the headless knight turns its attention towards him. Luckily, he returns home in one piece and continues exploring the forest after that, fighting stronger monsters and mastering his attack magic. At night, he goes to the lake again, where the headless knight is waiting for him. Ryou could not find anything about headless riders or dullahans in the book, and he wonders if it is because they are high-level monsters or if they are not considered monsters at all. However, none of that matters because he is here to spar against it. Ryou attacks the headless knight with a sword made of ice, but he can't manage to land a single strike. He keeps taking hits instead, but blocks them all with an ice shield. He eventually gets exhausted and falls on the ground, but the headless knight doesn't attack him because it is actually training him. As he gets up, the headless knight comes towards him, holding a small crystal knife. The knight coats the knife in water and then freezes it, turning it into a sword of ice. It gives the sword to Ryou, who realizes that the headless knight is asking him to master this technique. Soon after that, Ryou runs into the assassin hawk he fought earlier, but this time, it has evolved into a stronger version of itself, but also lost all its rights. The evolved hawk sends wind slashes at Ryou, who creates ice walls to block them instantly. He barely manages to avoid getting hit by the attacks that tear through his shields because they are much stronger than the last time. Ryou is forced to run away, and he can only block the hawk's attacks. The hawk suddenly speeds towards him, and Ryou somehow stops its attack by piling multiple ice shields in front of him. He tries to hit the hawk with icicles, but that doesn't work out either, and then the hawk uses a sonic attack to immediately cancel his ice shields. Ryou realizes that he is in trouble now, but then the hawk shocks him both figuratively and literally by attacking him with a thunderbolt. The monster swoops towards him to finish things, but Ryou manages to pull out his crystal sword and parry its attack. He can even slash away the invisible wind attacks sent by the bird, and when it swoops towards him again, he manages to stab it through the chest. The hawk falls to the ground and Ryou walks towards it, realizing that he just met the monster twice, but they developed a really strong bond. He thanks the hawk for motivating him to grow stronger and then pulls out the sword to let it bleed to death peacefully. Ryou then begins to head home, but then to his surprise, a dragon comes there. He figures that it is going to be his last day in this world, but surprisingly, the dragon starts talking to him through telepathy. The dragon asks him if he saw a black hawk and Ryou panics, thinking that he might have killed the dragon's minion. Luckily, the dragon seems pretty chill about it and even compliments Ryou on his achievement. He then points that the weapon he is carrying is quite rare, because it is the sword of the Fairy King. Ryou can't believe that, and he decides to learn more about the world from the friendly dragon who introduces himself as Lewin. They talk all day, but in the evening, the dragon gets called home, and he tells Ryou that they might meet again someday. On the other hand, the angels. A few weeks later, Ryou starts craving seafood, so he visits the beach, but he is shocked to find a shipwreck there. He quickly finds a man near the ship, and on checking him closely, Ryou finds that he is not alive anymore. Suddenly, he hears a man groaning and his eyes brighten, because this is the first human he has met since coming to this world. The man named Abel has flashbacks of a giant octopus monster attacking his ship during a storm, which caused him to fall into the ocean, but when he opens his eyes, he finds himself in Ryou's house. He realizes that he made it out safely somehow, and immediately starts searching for others. As he leaves the house, he becomes even more confused because he has no idea where this place is, and just then, Ryou approaches him from behind. Abel is shocked because despite being a fairly skilled warrior, he could not sense Ryou coming. He is also shocked by his dressing sense, but decides to be polite and not talk about it at first. Abel introduces himself to Ryou and thanks him for saving his life. Ryou replies that he could only save him, and everyone else was already dead when he found them. Abel tells him not to worry about those guys because they were smugglers, but before he can elaborate, his stomach starts growling. Ryou tells him that they can talk over a meal and leads him inside, where Abel the nosy quickly brings up the topic of his clothes. Ryou tells him that he has no other clothes and no fabric to create new ones, and Abel tells him to just buy some. He immediately stops, thinking that Ryou must be too poor to afford buying clothes, but Ryou lessens his guilt by telling him that there are no people who live in this area besides him. Abel then asks Ryou if he hunts for food, and he affirms. Next, he asks if he uses the knife for that, but Ryou shows off his water magic, saying that he does most of his hunting using magic. Abel is impressed because only half the people in the world can use magic, and he is among the other half that can't. That is surprising news to Ryou because the angel told him that only 20% of people can use magic. Anyway, Abel asks him to take him to the shore because he needs to confirm something. On the way, he tells Ryou to let him take the front lines if they run into any sort of danger. Ryou replies that it is not necessary, but Abel insists because he doesn't want to be the one being saved all the time. Ryou lets him do as he pleases, and they soon reach the broken ship where all the bodies have vanished. Abel thinks that either the monsters or the sea took them, and he thanks Ryou for rescuing him because otherwise he would have faced the same situation. Abel then says that he couldn't find what he was looking for, and for now, he wants to meet up with his friends. But the storm sent the ship far south, and he has no idea which direction should he follow now. He suddenly gets an idea and asks Ryou if he would like to come with him. Ryou is shocked to hear this, and Abel says that he could use his help to find his way back, and then he could find him a job that will allow him to live in better conditions. Ryou thinks about his offer for a while, and in the end, he decides to become Abel's guide back to the city. That evening, he looks at his garden that he has cultivated with a lot of effort, and he gets a bit sad thinking about leaving it all behind. At night, he tells Abel that he is going out to say goodbye to someone, and even though the knight is curious about the person, he decides not to pry into the matter. Meanwhile, Ryou heads to the lake to see the headless knight, and inform him that he will be leaving the forest for a long time. He thanks the knight for teaching him how to fight, and then takes out his knife, saying that he will fight extra hard tonight. The headless knight also draws his sword, and then Ryou charges towards him, pushing him back with his relentless strikes. After a long and hard fight, Ryou gets exhausted, and the knight returns to the lake. Ryou thanks him one more time, and the knight remains silent. However, as soon as he reaches his position, he turns around and summons a magic suit from inside the water as a farewell gift. Ryou gets sentimental on receiving the suit, and he once again thanks the headless knight before returning home. The next morning, Ryou and Abel get ready to depart on their journey, and Ryou starts feeling nostalgic about leaving the place he has spent so much time in. Soon, they run into a wild boar in the forest, and Abel asks him to let him handle it. He dashes towards the boar with his sword drawn, and then uses a combat skill to turn the poor animal into a donut. Ryou is amazed and asks what are combat skills, and Abel explains that people who fight with weapons use combat skills. They camp in a hollow tree at night, and the next day, they resume their journey through the forest. They come across some lizardmen in a swamp, and Abel decides to change the route instead of crossing paths with them because they are quite strong. However, Ryou can sense that the lizardmen are following them even after they change their path, and Abel gets ready to fight them. Ryou tells him that there are too many of them, and he will use his magic to fight too. Abel thinks that Ryou won't be able to fight without his staff, but he is shocked when Ryou blitzes 4 lizardmen with his icicle lances. After the fight ends, Abel asks Ryou about the spell he just used. He replies that it is just the regular icicle lance, but Abel tells him that his wind mage friends can only cast 1 attack at a time when they use magic, but he summoned 4 icicle lances at once. Ryou tells him that it must be a problem of the wind magic because this is pretty normal for water magic. Abel decides not to think about it that much and says they should continue their journey, but before that Ryou creates 2 glasses using ice and summons water in them. Abel notices that he used a different incantation this time, and Ryou covers it up by saying that he must have heard it wrong the last time. After that, Abel gives Ryou a coin, and he excitedly says that this is the first time he is seeing money. Abel is dumbfounded because he always thought that Ryou was poor, but he never imagined him to be this poor. He then starts telling Ryou that there are 3 major countries in the Central Plains that include the Kingdom of Nightly, the Debuhi Empire, and the Handelu Federation. Ryou starts throwing shade on the Debuhi Empire because he doesn't like the name, and while he keeps talking the stupid name, they reach a vast clearing. Suddenly, they notice a rock near them move on its own, and Abel quickly slashes it in half. Ryou also puts up a water shield to block the stones speeding towards them, and Abel realizes that they just walked into a nest of rock golems. Ryou asks if golems are not more humanoid in shape, but Abel decides to deal with them before answering the question. He dashes towards the nearest golem and blows a hole through it, but the golem quickly patches the wound and starts attacking him. Abel retreats, saying that their attacks won't be effective on the golems, but then Ryou gets an idea. He creates a huge ice cube in the air and drops it on top of the golems, squishing them. Abel is aghast because he has never seen a spell like that before, but Ryou uses it a few more times to defeat the rest of the golems. After that, they find a special rock golem with a big magic stone, and Abel says that it will sell for a lot. Ryou says that he would like to get the magic stone out of other golems as well, but they are buried under ice, and he is either too lazy or too dumb to just melt all of it. They continue their journey with that and soon come across a gigantic croc-hippo hybrid. Abel says that it is a behemoth, which is a very rare and powerful monster he has never seen before. Ryou asks if they should hunt it, but Abel tells him that it is not even possible. Just then, some wyverns also come there and Ryou gets excited because now they will see a battle between monsters. Soon, the wyverns begin shooting rocks at the behemoth with magic. but it just roars, canceling out their magic and causing them to fall to the ground. Ryou tells Abel that the giant monster probably used magic cancellation skill. Later, as they are having dinner, Abel asks Ryou more about the magic cancellation skill because he has only heard about certain traps in dungeons that can do that. Ryou gets excited on hearing about dungeons, and Abel tells him that there is a dungeon in the city of Lune where they are headed. Ryou gets mad that he didn't tell him about this important thing earlier, and asks him if he is hiding something else too. Abel asks him if he at least knows about dwarves and elves, but Ryou asks him to give him the details. A few days later, they reach a mountain range and Ryou says that they will find some human settlement after crossing the mountains. Abel asks him how can he be so sure, and Ryou wonders if he should tell him that he met a dragon who told him a lot about this world. He decides to keep it a secret in the end, saying that it is knowledge beyond human comprehension. Soon after that, they hear a strange sound and both of them get ready to fight. However, when a powerful monster called Griffin approaches them from the sky, both Ryou and Abel freak out. Abel starts having a panic attack, but Ryou quickly solves the situation by throwing a chunk of meat up in the air. Abel apes his act, and the griffin collects both pieces in its mouth before flying away. The boys heave a sigh of relief after it is gone, and they agree that they wouldn't have lasted long if they picked a fight with something so strong. As they continue their journey, Abel says that no human has encountered behemoths or griffins in the past 100 years, and the tall mountains must be stopping them from reaching human settlements. That reminds Ryou that the wyverns who fought the behemoth came from the north, which means their nest is nearby. He turns out to be right as they soon find some wyverns feeding on a monster. Ryou wants to fight, but Abel says it takes at least 20 experienced adventurers to face off against monsters as strong as wyverns. Ryou tells him that they won't be able to avoid fighting in the future, and asks if it will be better if the wyverns are pinned to the ground. Abel affirms, saying that he can beat one in close combat, and Ryou immediately steps out, chanting a long fake spell just to summon 4 icicles to stab the wings of the wyverns. Abel uses this chance to blow their brains out. But then 2 more wyverns arrive there. Ryou pins them down using icicles, but without chanting a spell this time, and Abel gets suspicious. Anyway, they defeat the wyverns and collect their magic stones, and then continue their journey to the north. Soon, they cross the mountain range and arrive at the Green Hills. Abel is surprised that they not only fought wyverns, but managed to get a lot of magic stones that will fetch a lot of money once they reach the Empire. Ryou suddenly gets curious about which country they are heading to, because he is fine with anyone except the Debuhi Empire. Abel tells him that the Debuhi Empire is a bit farther to the north, and Ryou appears relieved on hearing that. This confuses Abel, and he asks Ryou if he has got any issue with the Empire. He replies that he has no issue with the Empire or its people, but the name is so cringe that he doesn't want to associate with it, and Abel finds that quite odd. Suddenly, Ryou spots a road in the distance, and on seeing that it runs from east to west, Abel realizes that the mountain range they just crossed was not ordinary. However, when Ryou asks him what he is thinking about, he replies that it is nothing and says that the road will lead them to a town. Ryou gets excited at the thought of sleeping in a bed, and Abel recommends him to try out the food in the town. They reach the town by night, and as they are eating dinner in an inn, Abel suggests Ryou to get himself registered with the Adventurers Guild, because a guild license will work as his identity card. Also, if he has a guild license, he won't have to pay any tax when entering a new city. He reminds Ryou that he just paid a silver coin to cover for him when they entered the town, and Ryou begins taunting him, asking if he is going to keep the record of every penny he spends for a friend's sake. Abel is low-key cringed out at this behavior, but he continues his lecture and tells Ryou that if he becomes a member of the Adventurer Guild, the guild will buy magic stones and monster material from him at a good price. He explains that only alchemists can use those materials properly, and Ryou gets curious to learn more about them. However, he doesn't get the chance to ask any questions as the waitress brings his food, and he can't believe his eyes when he sees a plate of curry rice. Ryou tries to process how curry rice can exist in this world, because even in the Isekai anime, the protagonist has to work hard and travel all over the world to create the perfect curry, and he was kind of looking forward to that. The taste of the curry is also as delicious and nostalgic as the one he used to eat in Japan, and Ryou quickly finishes the plate before ordering more. The next day, Ryou keeps rambling about how good the curry was, and says that it turned out to be another interesting thing that Abel kept hidden from him. He playfully tells him to reveal all the secrets he is hiding, and Abel is taken aback by that, but Ryou just wanted him to tell him about the dessert shops in the town. Abel nervously walks away, saying that he doesn't like sweets, and Ryou is confused because of his sus behavior. Anyway, they resume their journey, and soon, they reach the town of Lune that is surrounded by vast wheat fields. As they reach the town gate, the guard Nimmer identifies Abel, and he is shocked to see him because he was reported missing a few months earlier. Abel tells him that a lot of things happened, and he managed to make it back home thanks to Ryou. Nimmer thanks Ryou for saving his friend and then eagerly shakes his hands, after which he starts catching up with Abel. Once they are inside the town, Abel tells Ryou that they should head straight to the guild, because with him there, Ryou can rank up immediately at the time of registration. He explains that usually, newbie adventurers are assigned F rank when they register, but if an adventurer ranked B or above can put a good word for them, they can rise up to D rank immediately. They soon reach the guild, and everyone there is pleasantly surprised to see Abel again. They surround him like he is some kind of celebrity, and Ryou is happy that Abel has so many people who care about him. He decides to let him enjoy this reunion for a bit more and steps outside to get some fresh air. He starts taking a walk when suddenly, he runs into an elf. While Ryou is captivated by her pointy ears and pretty face, the elf girl can't take her eyes off of him as well because of his outfit. She recognizes that it is the Fairy King's coat, and says that he must like Ryou a lot to give him such a gift. Ryou can't even understand what she means, and then the elf girl tells him that she is in a hurry today, but she hopes to meet him again someday. Ryou just stands there bamboozled when Abel comes outside to find him and tells him to come back in. He then introduces Ryou to all his friends as the guy who saved his life. Everyone thanks Ryou for saving Abel, and he starts liking all the attention he is getting. After that, Abel takes Ryou to the front desk and asks the receptionist to register him as a D-rank adventurer on his recommendation. The receptionist is shocked to hear this because no one from Abel's party has ever recommended anyone before, and he replies that Ryou is a very special case. The receptionist says that Ryou will still need to show proof of his strength before getting a rank up, and Abel says that he wants to talk to the guild master about that directly. The receptionist tells him and Abel to wait for a while, and soon, the dramatic guild master Hugh comes running as he hears that Abel has returned. Abel then introduces him to Ryou and says that he wants him to take the rank up exam. Hugh replies that they will need to test his strength for that, and Abel replies that Ryou is stronger than him, which the guild master finds really hard to believe. To prove his point, Abel shows Hugh all the magic stones they collected from the wyverns, and he loses his mind. He says that the amount of magic stones they have means they have hunted enough wyverns that could destroy an entire country, and Abel tells him that he doesn't need to worry about a monster attack because they hunted the wyverns south of the Malefic Mountains. Ryou is curious if the name of the mountain is significant somehow, and Hugh says that he hasn't heard of any person who has crossed the Malefic Mountains safely. He claims that they are so dangerous that even the highest-ranking adventurers don't go there without a very compelling reason. He can't believe that Ryou and Hugh are the first people in history to achieve this feat, and he immediately agrees to increase Ryou's rank without taking a test. Just then, Abel's party barges into the room, and they are really emotional because they thought they would never see him again. The guild master decides to let them catch up with their friend while he takes Ryou outside to register. Ryou follows him, but Abel asks him to wait at the receptionist's desk after he is done because he wants to show him to a special place. After that, Hugh leads Ryou to his office while telling him that Abel's party, the Crimson Sword, is one of their strongest and most popular parties. Ryou is not really surprised by that, and he is more curious if he really deserves to be a D rank right from the start. In response, Hugh tells him that he knows how talented Abel is, but he knows that he can't defeat a wyvern on his own. That makes him believe that Ryou played an important role in fighting the wyverns, which qualifies him to be a D rank. Just then, the receptionist comes to the office with the equipment needed to formally register Ryou as an adventurer, and Hugh leaves it to her because he has too much paperwork to handle. The receptionist Nina starts by introducing herself and then begins asking the basic interview questions. She then tells Ryou that for 300 days after his registration at the guild, he can stay at the guild lodgings, but then he will have to find another place to stay. Next, she tells him about the course on dungeon exploration that the guild offers new adventurers like him, and Ryou immediately replies that he wants to enroll in the course. Nina tells him to come to the meeting hall 2 days later at 9 o'clock in the morning, and Ryou is shocked to learn that they have clocks here. Nina then moves on to the actual registration process and tells Ryou to put his hand on the crystal device in front of him. As he places his hand on the crystal, it scans his biometrics and uploads the data on the metal plate kept on top, turning it into his guild card. Nina congratulates Ryou for officially being registered at the guild, and with that, they leave the office. Soon after that, Abel takes Ryou on a tour of the town, saying that he wants to buy him some clothes and a staff as the payment for escorting him here. Ryou is glad to receive the clothes, but he is curious about the staff. Abel says that all magicians need a staff, but Ryou replies that he can use magic just fine without any tools. He adds that he also uses a sword when he has to fight melee, so a staff wouldn't really help him out much. Abel is surprised to hear this, and he is even more surprised when Ryou tells him that the small knife he has is actually his sword. Anyway, Ryou tells him that he needs something more urgently than clothes or staff, and that is information about the basics of this world. Soon after that, he learns that the hour, day, week, and month in this world are the same as that on Earth, and they even use the metric system to measure stuff. Now he is sure that someone from Earth came to this world a long time ago and changed how things are done, which is why there are so many familiar things here. Just then, Abel returns from the store after paying for the things Ryou bought, and then he tells him that the main event of the day is still left. He takes Ryou to a huge inn, where all his friends from the guild are present to celebrate his safe return. They party all night, and the next morning, Nina has to bail Ryou out to show him the place where he will be staying. She takes him to a room where two newbie adventurers are already staying, and the brown-haired guy introduces himself as Nils, and the blonde dude as Ito. They welcome him to their room, and once Nina leaves, Nils starts talking about how much he likes her. Ito tells him to stop dreaming of women outside his league, and then he starts making small talk with Ryou about how things are at the guild lodging. Suddenly, Nina returns to the room with another newly registered adventurer, who nervously introduces himself as Ammon, and the four boys soon start to bond with each other. A few days after that, Ryou and Ammon complete their crash course on dungeon exploration for dummies, and their teacher tells them that they are going to enter the first level of a dungeon in the afternoon. Ammon is visibly tense about going into a dungeon, but Ryou tells him to chill out because if he gets worked up now, he will be tired by the time they reach the dungeon. The instructor then asks if anyone has any questions, and Ryou asks him if there is a way to instantly travel to the floors they have cleared before. The instructor is impressed by the question because only experienced adventurers know about that. He says that there are some dungeons in the south that have the feature to instantly travel between checkpoints, but there is nothing like that in Loon's dungeon. After that, the instructor leads all the students to the dungeon that is in the middle of the city. He explains that the city was actually built around the dungeon, and every few years, the monster population in the dungeon suddenly increases, and sometimes the monsters reach the surface. He explains that the walls around the dungeon protect the civilians from the monsters, but then assures the newbies that there is no chance of a great monster wave right now. Soon, they reach the first floor of the dungeon, which is a safe zone without monsters. The instructor tells everyone that they are free to explore the first floor, but they need to stay close to the entrance. Ryou and Ammon team up, and soon, Ryou senses a monster approaching them. He tells Ammon to strike the monster while he holds it in place, and the boy nervously draws his sword. A few moments later, a monster ant arrives there, and Ryou immediately identifies it as a soldier ant from the book he read. He tells Ammon to strike the neck of the monster while he stops it using icicle lances. Ryou completely pins the monster to the ground, and Ammon easily cuts off its neck, scoring his first kill. He is overjoyed at this, and Ryou extracts the ant's magic stone as a trophy for their first successful monster hunt. Later, they have dinner with their roommates who want to celebrate their first dungeon trip, and they are quite impressed that they managed to take down a soldier ant. Ammon says that he only dealt the finishing blow, and Ryou did most of the work by holding the ant down. He then says that he wants to go to the dungeon again tomorrow, but he is worried about going alone. Ryou offers to tag along because he also wants to explore the dungeon a bit more, because he is concerned about finding a monster on the first floor, even when the instructor said that there were no monsters there. Ito adds that he has also heard about soldier ants coming to the second and first floor lately, and the boys are confused about the reason. Just then, Abel arrives there and says it is because soldier ants can dig their way up, and the boys freak out on seeing the most famous adventurer in the town up close. Ryou, however, is frank as usual with his friend, and then Abel asks the boys to take care of him because he lacks common sense. Nils suddenly stands up in attention and introduces himself to Abel, saying that he is his idol and he wants to become a famous adventurer like him someday. He requests to shake his hand, and Abel obliges, telling him to work hard but make sure that survival is his first priority. Ryou then asks Abel what he is doing here so late, and he replies that he just got back from his recent mission. Just then, his party arrives there, and the girls are mad that he came here instead of reporting to the guildmaster. He tells them that he was just guiding some beginners who needed help, but the lowly Lin tells Shaq's lost son Warren to take him away. The big guy carries Abel on his back as he screams like a baby, and then Lin starts staring at Ryou with jealous eyes. He gets a bit nervous and asks what she wants, but then the priestess Lihia tells her to snap out of it before apologizing to Ryou for the disturbance. As they go away, Ito and Nils start fanboying after them. But Ryou doesn't understand what they find impressive about that group of buffoons. Meanwhile, Ryou tells Lin that it was not nice of her to stare at Ryou, but she replies that she was just curious because Abel keeps on glazing his magic skills. Ryou admits that she is curious too, but Abel tells them they will soon see Ryou's true skills. The next day, Ryou and Ammon go to the dungeon again, and this time, they face some monster dogs. while Ryou holds the dogs down using icicle lances. Ammon proves to be a decent swordsman as well and takes down a couple of them. As they take a break after that, Ryou remarks that Ammon's sword-fighting style reminds him of Abel, and he explains that his teacher was an old dude named Kiro, who learned sword-fighting from a big school in the capital. Ryou assumes that Abel must have learned from the same school, and he sees potential in Ammon to become quite strong as well. Ammon is impressed by his knowledge of swordplay, even though he is just a mage, and Ryou tells him that he practiced with a mentor, but he developed his own sword style. He then remarks that Ammon's style seems to be very exhausting, but it is also very safe, and he just needs to work on his stamina. He tells Ammon that Abel used to practice his form the first thing in the morning during their travels, and that just shows that even the most talented people need to work hard. Ammon feels motivated on hearing that and decides to work hard to become stronger, and Ryou is pleased by his response. The next day, Ryou visits the library, and it is much bigger than his expectations. That's what she said. Anyway, he asks the librarian to show him to the alchemy section, and she shows him where books for beginners are kept. However, there are too many options that overwhelm Ryou, so he decides to take a break outside. Suddenly, the city turns dark as a total solar eclipse occurs, and Ryou stares at it without eye protection like my uncle who is now blind. Just 1 second later, he realizes something is odd, and all the people around him have vanished. The atmosphere itself feels different, and then suddenly, he feels an attack coming from behind. He is fast enough to react in time, blocking the powerful fire blast using a wall of ice. He wonders who the hell attacked him, and then sees a badass demon mommy coming towards him, walking like she just came out of GTA 4. She is quite amused to see a human in her space, and decides to have fun defeating him. Ryou realizes that he is facing a demon now, and he is quite sure that she is the strongest being he has ever seen in this world. He wants to run away from her, but he feels that he won't be able to escape this strange space no matter what he tries, so he decides to fight back. He immediately summons dozens of ice shields right before the demon mommy attacks, blocking her massive firestorm. She abruptly changes her attack, shooting an invisible wind bullet that pierces Ryou's shields, but it gets blocked by his armor. The demon can't process how a human armor can block against her attack, but as she looks closely, she finds that Ryou is wearing the Fairy King's robe. She realizes that he must be an impressive mage to have such gear and power to block her attacks, so she decides to cut him down using her sword instead of magic. Ryou also draws his ice sword and blocks her attack. He maintains a defensive position as the demon lady keeps pushing him back, but she is much faster than him, and he barely dodges a deadly strike to his face. He decides to counterattack by shooting hundreds of icicle lances at her, but the demon swiftly dodges all of them, not noticing that the solar eclipse is ending as she wastes her time playing around. Meanwhile, Ryou realizes that she is using wind magic to boost her speed, and then she jumps at him to deal the finishing blow. Ryou manages to block it without much difficulty because even though the demon is fast, her strikes are nothing compared to the headless knight who taught him. The demon, on the other hand, is impressed and asks who the hell is he to have the Fairy King's robe as well as his sword. She creates a fireball to attack him, but Ryou cancels it instantly using an icicle lance. This pisses the demon off, and she decides to kill him quickly because he can be a danger to her if the fight goes on for longer. She attacks him ruthlessly, but Ryou confidently defends against her strikes. He finds a chance to counterattack, and that makes the demon lose her balance. Ryou was waiting for this moment, and he launches a barrage of icicle lances at her. The demoness creates a wall of fire around her, neutralizing all his attacks, but as their intensity increases, she creates rock walls to protect herself. Ryou also changes his attack pattern, using the high-pressure water jets to cut through the wall and injure the demon. She is shocked when his attacks hurt him, but luckily for her, Ryou was just attacking blindly because of all the smoke. He then decides to go in for the kill, but she jumps straight towards him to block his attack. As they clash mid-air, Ryou notices the demon woman's wounds healing super fast. The moment he gets distracted by that, she sends his crashing into a building, but just as she is about to launch a powerful attack to finish him off, she notices water drops falling from the sky. She is surprised by that, but as a water drop touches her face and scalds her because it was even hotter than the boiling temperature, she screams in pain. She immediately covers herself in a rock ball while waiting for the boiling rain to end, and in the meantime, Ryou comes down. Suddenly, the demon woman unleashes powerful flame magic, blowing up everything around her. She walks towards Ryou menacingly, but by then, the eclipse is almost over and her sword disintegrates as sunlight touches it. The demoness says that they won't be able to finish their fight this time, and Ryou tells her to get lost already. She doesn't really mind him acting like a jerk and introduces herself as Leonor, asking Ryou about his name. He tells her his name too, even though he makes it clear that he doesn't want to know anything more about a demon. Leonore is surprised that Ryou knows about demons, and she thinks that she should have done all she could to kill him instead of enjoying their fight. She then tells Ryou that they will fight again in the future, but it is possible that he runs into another demon before that. She tells him not to get killed by anyone else because she will be much stronger the next time and finish him off herself. Ryou is shocked to hear that, but then the eclipse ends and everything returns to normal without a trace of the battle that just took place there. Ryou feels really odd now, and he decides to buy some books and then get some rest. He first heads to the bank to withdraw some money that he got from selling the wyvern magic stones, and then passes by his dorm room to meet his friends. He notices they are not there, but as he is about to leave the dorm, he finds them being bullied by some other adventurers. Nils and Ito call him a coward for ambushing them when they were injured, but the leader of the bullies, Dan, tells them that they can say the same thing when monsters ambush them in the dungeon and they die. Suddenly, his lackeys are knocked out cold because Ryou attacked them from behind, and he tells Dan that he was absolutely right, but he should hear his own advice sometimes. He asks him if he is ready to run now that his friends are down, and Dan immediately rushes to punch him. Ryou simply steps aside and hits him in the gut with his sword's handle, causing him to throw up this morning's breakfast. He then moves on to heal his friends, telling them that they need more stamina so that no punk-ass can catch them off guard the next time. However, before that, he says they should all recover and relax. They hit the public bath where the priest Ito heals Ryou's wound from the wind bullet. Everyone is curious about who could injure Ryou when he is so strong, and he decides not to tell them about the demon right now because relaxing comes first. Soon after that, Ammon, Nils and Ito start going to the dungeon as a team. While Nils and Ammon fight goblins, Ito stays in the back to assist them and heal them when they get injured. Nils starts collecting the magic stones from goblins while Ito heals Ammon, and they talk about how dangerous it was for them to run into some goblins. Nils says that they should retreat now because going any further will be dangerous, and Ito agrees with him because they shouldn't have found goblin archers on the 4th floor of the dungeon. Ammon, on the other hand, wants to hunt some more monsters and earn some money, but Nils remembers what Abel told them about never risking their life for less important things. In the end, they head back to the surface, which is the greatest save of the day, because just a few floors below, a group of adventurers has met its end at the hands of a huge and powerful monster. Back on the surface, Ryou thinks about how Leonore's magic was out of this world, but he was on equal footing with her in terms of casting speed. He decides to improve on his strengths and erase his weaknesses, which reminds him that he couldn't keep up with Leonore's movement speed yesterday. He gets jealous of her wind magic, but since he can't do that, he decides not to be jealous and come up with his own solutions instead. He thinks that he should use a water jet to propel himself ahead, and though he has already done it underwater before, he doesn't know if it will work on the surface. He first creates an icy platform in front of himself, and then uses hundreds of small water jets, pushing all the points of his back to propel him forward. However, he only goes as fast as an old grandma at a traffic crossing. Ryou is really dissatisfied with those results, but he decides to call it work in progress, which is what I call my mental health. He then heads to the library to learn more about demons and alchemy, and at the same time, the lowly wizard Lynn from Abel's party is also studying in the library. She is trying to find any records of a spell that can create an ice wall thick enough to crush golems, but she can't find anything. She is pleased because she wants to believe that Ryou is just a scammer who fooled Abel, and thinks that only the strongest wizard on the continent can use such strong magic spells. Just as she puts the book back on the shelf, she sees the elf girl Syrah. The two girls exchange greetings and make small talk, before Syrah remembers that she has to get back to her group. On the other hand, Ammon and others return to the guild, and Nils starts stuttering like a simp on seeing the receptionist Nina. Ito bonks him on the head as he tells Nina that they found goblin archers on the 5th floor, which is unheard of, and that is why they returned quickly to report to her. Nina confirms the magic stones and rushes to inform the guildmaster about the incident, thanking the boys for this crucial information. Hugh is not pleased to hear that goblins were found on the 5th floor when they are monsters that belong below the 10th floor of the dungeon. He thinks that this might be the sign of a bigger problem, and asks Nina to summon all the B rank and above parties immediately. Nina tells him that there are only 2 high-ranked parties in the city right now, including Abel's Crimson Sword and the White Brigade. Soon, Abel and his party head to Hugh's office, and he is not happy that he will need to work with the White Brigade on this mission because he doesn't like their leader. The girls tell him to stop being such a wimp, and he somehow calms down before entering the office. Phelps, the leader of the White Brigade, is already there, and Abel struggles not to make a face on seeing him. Once both of them sit down, Hugh explains that goblins were found on the 5th floor of the dungeon, and the information is fully reliable. He says that both Crimson Sword and White Brigade need to enter the dungeon and investigate it for any signs of a monster outbreak. He says that the last outbreak happened 10 years ago, and even though it is quite early, there are chances that another outbreak is on the way. He offers them an advance payment of 100 gold coins and another 200 gold coins when the mission is complete, but then Abel asks him if they are only supposed to investigate the matter. Hugh affirms, and then Phelps asks what are they supposed to do if the monster outbreak has started. The guildmaster replies that they should come back to the surface immediately because they will lock down the walls around the dungeon and take help from the knights to deal with the monsters. He tells them that he has already informed the Lord and the Knights' headquarters about this, because if it is really a monster outbreak, they need to be fully prepared for it. He then asks both the parties if they are willing to accept this mission, and they immediately agree to it. The next day, Ryou gets ready to visit the Northern Library by the time his roommates wake up. He tells them that he was planning to study more about alchemy and heard that the Northern Library had books on more advanced topics. Ito tells him that he has heard right, and D rank and above adventurers can access the Northern Library. Ammon adds that he has heard rumors about forbidden books being stored in the Northern Library as well. Ryou is really excited on hearing this, but Ito tells him that he needs to be at least a B rank adventurer to read those books. The boys wish him all the best on his quest for knowledge as they decide to get ready for another round of dungeon raid. Ryou soon reaches the Northern Library and immediately likes the vibe of the place. He begins looking around to find the books he needs and thinks that if he asks someone to show him the books about demons, they will surely freak out. However, just as he climbs the stairs to the first floor, he sees the elf girl Syrah there, and he is immediately smitten by her. On the other hand, Hugh and the two high-ranked parties have reached the gates of the dungeon. Just as they are about to open the door, Abel stops Hugh because his instincts tell him that something is wrong. He asks Lynn to use her wind magic to scan the first floor for any monsters, and she immediately finds hundreds of monsters waiting for them right in front of the gate. Everyone panics on hearing this because this is enough proof that the great monster outbreak has already begun. Hugh orders everyone to fall back and contact the knights and the guild. In the guild, Nils and others see the notice that the dungeon has been closed, and they think that it is because of the goblin archers they found. Just then, a man comes running there to announce that a monster outbreak has started and all the adventurers are to get on the walls surrounding the dungeon to stop the monsters. On the other side, Ryou and Syrah have been staring at each other while all this happened. And then she finally says that they meet again. They introduce themselves and then Syrah asks if he is looking for anything special. Ryou almost blurts out that he is looking into demons, but covers it up and says that he wants to learn alchemy to create golems. Syrah is impressed by his ambition because creating golems is not easy, but she tells him that there are no books that deal particularly with that. However, she asks him to follow her because she can tell him which books will help him the most as she knows almost everything about this library. They start talking about books and adventuring on the way, and Syrah reveals that she is the sole member of a B-rank adventurer party called Wind. Ryou remarks that a friend told him that there was only one elf in the city, and Syrah tells him that elves don't mingle with humans, but she is an oddball. On the other hand, all adventurers in the city have reached the dungeon walls, and soon, the monsters break through the heavy gate. Hugh commands everyone to attack them using magic and arrows, starting a fierce battle against the goblin army. The knights also join them soon, and the situation looks under control, but Hugh is worried because there are more monsters than he saw in the last outbreak. In the meantime, Abel's party runs out of arrows, but just then, Nils brings a barrel full of arrows to him along with a message from Hugh that his party is supposed to take down the boss monster after the wave of mobs ends. Soon, almost all the goblins are down, and Hugh commands Abel and Phelps to lead their parties into the battle. They jump down from the wall and Lynn uses wind magic to slow down their landing. They rush ahead, dealing with the remaining goblins quickly before reaching the door and waiting for the boss. Soon, a goblin general comes out of it, and they think that it will all end once they kill him. However, two more goblin generals come out after him, and Abel realizes that they are dealing with a goblin king here. He says that they need to deal with the goblin generals before the goblin king arrives because they will become too strong otherwise. He decided that he and Phelps will take down one king each, while Lynn and Lichia will take the remaining one. They begin fighting the generals, and Abel manages to cut off his enemy's arms, when suddenly, he spots the Goblin King at the entrance and yells at everyone to get down. The very next moment, a powerful wind slash comes out from the dungeon, killing the Goblin generals in one hit. Everyone is shocked by the Goblin King's strength and ruthlessness, but Abel and Phelps know that they are the only ones who can fight it. They team up to attack the Goblin King together, but their weapons fail to pierce his armor. Suddenly, Abel dashes straight at the Goblin King, using his skill to turn into a ghost so that he can dodge his attack. He then reaches closer to him and uses his combat skill to pierce his heart, but fails to finish the job. The Goblin King tries to attack him, but Abel commands Lynn to finish him off as he vanishes again. Lin's wind spears pass through him and hit the Goblin King, taking him down. Everyone is relieved on seeing that they finally won, but they do not know that things are far from over as something even more dangerous is still inside the dungeon. Later that day, as Ryou returns to the guild, he finds everyone abnormally hyped up, while Hugh is buried under a mountain of paperwork. He is sulking in his office because he has to update the local lord and the knight commander about the monster outbreak, and then pay the fee to all the adventurers who took part in the battle. He also has to assess the performance of all the adventurers, send the invoices to the royal capital to get some funds and plan the repair of the damaged facilities while doing his normal job as well. The only relief is that the dungeon is going to be closed off for 1 month, so he doesn't have to worry about that aspect. But Hugh knows that will create another set of problems. Meanwhile, Ryou learns from his friends that there was a monster outbreak in the dungeon, and they dealt with it thanks to the top 2 parties. That is the reason for the festive atmosphere, and Ryou thinks that it is a good reason. Nils begins glazing Abel's skills and talks about how he fought with the Goblin King. Ito adds that Lin dealt the finishing blow with Bullet Rain, which is the highest level wind magic. Ammon says that Abel was able to dodge that attack even without moving, and he wonders how could he do that. Just then, Abel arrives there and says that he used the sword skill called Perfect Shadow that allows him to dodge all ranged attacks. Nils and others start fanboying as they see Abel, and he also praises them for their help. Meanwhile, Ryou keeps thinking about the Perfect Shadow skill and says that whoever named it must have been a genius. Just then, Lin and Lehia arrive there looking for Abel, and they say that they knew he would be with Ryou. Ryou feels a lot of hostility behind their sweet-sounding words, but then suddenly, Lin asks him if he can really create a wall of ice. He affirms, saying that his limit is a cube with a 40-meter edge, and Lin can't believe her ears. Ryou tells her that it was not easy to learn and master, but he managed to do it somehow. She asks him if it is an original spell, but he doesn't even know what that means. Lin says that it is basic knowledge that most spells are cast by reciting incantations, but Ryou says that he believes that incantations are a personal preference. Lin doesn't even get what he is saying, but before she can ask another question, Nils tells Ryou that the food is getting cold, and he rushes to the food counter immediately. Lin is confused, and Abel tells her that Ryou thinks that incantations are just used because they sound cool, and he can use magic without them, and that is the most bizarre thing Lin has ever heard. Soon after that, jobs become scarce at the guild. Nils and his friend just watch the empty notice board because the jobs were already taken when they came in. Just then, Ryou also arrives there, and he learns about how the job market has been struggling ever since the dungeon got shut temporarily. The boys ask him if he is here for a quest too, and Ryou replies that he needs to buy some magic copper ore for his alchemy experiments. They are shocked to hear this because magic ore is really costly, but they know that Ryou is filthy rich, so it doesn't matter to him. On the other hand, they are struggling to get a job. Ryou decides to help his bros out, and he says that he will hire them for a job to mine magic copper ore. Nils tells him that there is an abandoned mine near the city, and Ryou is glad to learn that. He tells the boys that he will pay them 4 gold coins each just for taking up the job, and then he will buy each piece of copper ore for 25 gold coins, but his only condition is that they should all return home safe. The boys are thrilled to hear that because they won't make that much money in a year through normal jobs. They ask him if he is sure he can pay this much, and Ryou replies that it is still cheaper than the market rate of the magic copper ore. They gladly leave for the job and Ryou returns to his room, but then he hears some disturbing voices coming from the street. He finds a group of knights trying to take a woman with them, and an adventurer is trying to stop them. Ryou watches the drama intensify as the knights drag the girl away, and the adventurer pushes them to free her. This pisses one knight, and he draws his sword to teach the adventurer a lesson. However, just as he is about to strike him, he slips and falls, but there is nothing there to make him slip. He asks the adventurer what he did, and he replies that it must have been John Cena who tripped him. This makes the adventurer even more angry at this, but he falls once again as he tries to get up. Just then, Phelps comes there and tells the knights to back away if they don't want to be punished. They ask him how dare a mere adventurer talk to them in this tone, and Phelps tells them that he is not just an adventurer, but also a noble from the Heinlein family. One of the knights realizes that it is the same family from which the previous commander of the Royal Knights came, and Phelps declares that they are talking about his dad. He then tells them to stop shaming the reputation of knights, and they immediately run away. Phelps then commends the adventurer on his bravery and asks him to escort the woman to her friends. Once they leave, he turns towards Ryou's window, who greets him. Phelps introduces himself as the leader of the White Brigade Party, and says that he has heard all about his amazing magic. Ryou panics, thinking that Phelps noticed him using magic to make the knight slip, but he says that he is only talking about what Abel told him. Just as they are starting to talk, Phelps' secretary comes there to take him away, and Ryou can tell that both of them are really strong. Later, he has dinner by himself and Abel comes there to sit with him. He remarks that it is rare to see Ryou alone these days, and he says the same thing about him. He decides to let Ryou in on a secret because he could use his help, and soon, they find themselves in the entertainment district. There, Abel reveals that the captain of knights is his friend, and he has requested him to bring back the troublesome knights who have run away to have fun. Ryou understands it now, but then suddenly, he notices some shady masked adventurers. He brings Abel's attention towards them and says that he has never seen them before, not even at the welcome party. Abel says that they get a lot of traveling adventurers because of the dungeon, but Ryou remarks that the dungeon is closed right now. The adventurers notice them as well, and they immediately try to lure them into a trap. Ryou and Abel willingly follow them, but when the thugs try to ambush them, Ryou knocks them out with heavy ice stones immediately. Abel then picks up an alchemy tool that they dropped and Ryou wants it, but he tells him that it is evidence. He then ties up the thugs and finds that they are C-ranked adventurers from another country. Abel decides to inform the city guards about them and resume his mission to find the troublemaking knights, unaware that they are targeting Phelps to get revenge for earlier. However, they can't even move once they decide to attack him because the secretary has already paralyzed them with poison needles. She then casts a fire spell, burning the knights so thoroughly that not even their ashes remain. The next day, a research team arrives from the capital to study the dungeon after the monster outbreak, and Hugh immediately gets in a verbal spat with their leader Clive because of his unreasonable demands. He wants the city of Lune to provide food and supplies to his entire group when they are facing an acute shortage, and he also wants to open up the dungeon to research it. Hugh tells him that it is stupid to open the dungeon so soon after an outbreak, but Clive tells him that he has got full authority from the newly appointed Minister of Dungeon Exploration. The two of them get in a deadlock and the debate doesn't seem to end, so the wise old mage decides to intervene. He first tells Hugh that they will handle the food issue next time, and this time, the city can accommodate them. As for opening the dungeon, Clive says that Hugh has no choice, but he decides to put one condition of his own. He says that if the city or its citizens are harmed by opening the dungeon, it will be the responsibility of the ministry. Clive gets furious on hearing his demand, but Hugh makes it clear that he won't open the dungeon gate until he agrees with it. The old mage convinces Clive to accept the condition, and then says that they will hire some skilled adventurers as their guards for this mission. On the other hand, Ryou visits the inn where Abel and his party stay to see if they serve better food than the guild lodgings. However, just as he is about to enter, a girl runs out of the door and asks him to take her to the Adventurer Guild because she has an urgent message to deliver. Ryou is quite hungry, but he decides to help the girl, who delivers the letter to Abel. His teacher from the royal capital has sent it, asking him to help the research party that is being sent to explore the dungeon. Abel is not sure about that because many years ago, a powerful rank party went into a dungeon shortly after an outbreak, and they never returned. Ryou tells him that he should decline the request in that case, and he decides to go back to the inn to have lunch. Meanwhile, the girl introduces herself as Natalie, a novice mage from a family of reputed water magic users. Lynn immediately asks her if she has heard of a spell to cast ice wall high up in the air, and she replies that she has not, but she is only starting to learn magic. Natalie asks them if there is someone who can cast such spells, and they tell him that the guy who brought her here can do that. She is surprised to hear that, and Abel once again starts glazing Ryou. He then orders his party members that they should never fight Ryou under any condition, because they won't be able to defeat him together. He also tells Natalie that if she needs help and she can't find them, she should immediately go to Ryou. The next day, the research team gets ready to enter the dungeon, and in the end, Abel accepts the request to guard them. He knows the old mage from the past, and they talk about the mana detector tool that can transmit signals of mana from the dungeon to the analysis team that has set camp outside. 3 days pass after this, and the research team reaches the 7th floor of the dungeon, but they don't find anything unusual at all. However, Clive and his team from the Royal Academy seem to be in a hurry to find something, and Abel decides not to bother with pompous pricks like them. At the same time, outside, the lower-ranked adventurers receive updates about things going on in the dungeon and the jobs they can take while it is still off-limits to them. Ryou has a question in his mind, and he asks Hugh about the color of the magic stones that the monsters from the outbreak dropped. Hugh tells him that it is an excellent question because all the goblins dropped yellow magic stones when they are supposed to be green instead. Meanwhile, Clive and his team suddenly come across a suspicious gate in the dungeon that gives strange energy reading. They think that it must be a portal leading to a faraway place, so they set up their equipment around it. However, just as they try to touch the gate, everyone suddenly vanishes, and Natalie, who is taking the readings, is shocked because the readings also stop coming as soon as everyone vanishes. Luckily, everyone has been teleported to the same location, and Abel confirms the safety of his team before uniting with the senior mage. Clive, on the other hand, orders his men to begin examining the strange grassland they have reached. But he tells them to be careful because they don't know what kind of dangers are lurking here. His right-hand man comes there just then, asking what they should do now. Clive has no idea, but at least his theory that the monsters came from the 38th floor of the dungeon has been proven wrong. He now realizes that the monsters came from this strange place that was beyond the gate. He thinks that this is a great discovery, and with this, he will be able to rise to the position of a minister in no time. As he is grinning to himself, the other researcher points out some figures on the horizon, and they look like some creepy Pokémons. On the other hand, Natalie and the data collection team are worried about the lost signal. Suddenly, the signal returns and tells them that the exploration team is on the 40th floor, but it vanishes immediately again. Just then, a guy named Christopher arrives there, and he introduces himself as the representative of the Magic College. He asks the researchers from the academy what they found, and asks them to share whatever they can despite the fact that their organizations are rivals. He says that a few minutes ago, the people entering the dungeon vanished, and if they don't figure out what is going on, it might be too late for them. The researchers are shocked, and Christopher explains that he hired some adventurers to enter the dungeon. But just as he was about to enter the staircase after them, they all suddenly vanished. The researchers are shocked to hear this, and their leader verifies that they also found their team vanishing just a few minutes ago, and then their signal reappeared for a brief moment, but they were on the 40th floor. Christopher is shocked to hear this because no one has even made it past the 38th floor of this dungeon yet, and he knows that even B-rank parties struggle beyond the 30th floor. The researchers tell him about Abel's party that is guarding their team, and Christopher says that he has already sent a message to the guildmaster to ask for his help. However, Natalie panics, realizing that no one might be able to solve this situation. In this condition, her only hope is Ryou because Abel told her to contact him if she can't reach out to anyone else. She immediately runs away to find him, leaving everyone confused. On the other hand, the news about the research party vanishing reaches Hugh, who starts panicking. He decides to head over to the dungeon entrance immediately and tells the receptionist to get everyone on standby, but not to reveal anything to them until he confirms the situation with his own eyes. Meanwhile, Ryou is wandering around the library, unable to find any helpful books. As he climbs up to the first floor, he low-key starts wishing to see the elf baddie Syrah again, and the universe listens to his prayers because Syrah spots him as she is returning some books. Ryou eagerly goes to her side, and as they start talking, he reveals that he was looking for records of past eclipses and monster outbreaks to compare them. Syrah tells him that she knows where exactly those documents are, and she tells Ryou to follow him. On the way, Syrah begins learning about Ryou's theory that solar eclipses and monster outbreaks are connected, and she believes that he is right. She has lived long enough to see that there has always been a solar eclipse before a dungeon outbreak, but she has never seen a total solar eclipse like the one that happened a couple days ago. She says that she has tried researching this topic before, but she is curious about why Ryou made that connection. He gets nervous because he can't tell her that he fought a demon in the middle of the eclipse, so he decides to change the topic. He asks Syrah about the colors of the magic stones they find from monsters and the factors that affect it. She lets him change the topic and says that the main factor is the age of the monster. Ryou replies that he learned that from Abel during their travels, and then says that he is curious about the yellow-colored magic stones that were found from the monsters during the outbreak. Syrah is confused on hearing that because only recently born monsters have pale magic stones, and she was suspecting that it was the old and powerful monsters of the dungeon that come out during the outbreak. Ryou agrees with her because the weaker goblins are a different story, but goblin generals and the goblin king can't leave the dungeon just after they have spawned. He thinks that it seems unnatural, but creating such a huge horde of monsters artificially would require a ridiculous amount of mana. Syrah says that she once read some records about the magic stones extracted from a previous monster outbreak being pale yellow as well, and asks Ryou if he wants to see the old and damaged records. He is glad to take up the offer, and Syrah leads him to a lesser-known part of the library. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, Abel is still discussing the teleportation incident with the senior mage. No one is sure where they are, but the senior mage asks a researcher if their tools are working properly in this place. He verifies that the mana detector tool is still working, and he thinks that the data collection team knows about their situation so they can send help soon. The senior mage, however, thinks that help might not be able to arrive on time. He asks Lihia if this place doesn't remind her of something familiar, and she puts her brain on overdrive to realize that it feels a lot like being inside a sanctuary square, which is the highest level defensive magic. She tells Abel and others that only the most powerful priests can use that spell, and it is considered a divine miracle that can block any attack. Abel realizes that if they are inside some kind of barrier, then they can't get out, and no one can get inside the barrier to help them either. The mage agrees with him, and Lyhia says that if they can't find where the barrier ends, it must be massive. Abel thinks that the situation just got a lot worse, and he asks Lynn to use her wind magic to detect if any monsters are near. She obeys his command and uses her spell to find a group of around 1,000 humans nearby, and along with them, she senses about 50 creatures that she has never seen before. Abel and the mage think that the 1,000 humans must be Clive and his group, and they decide to meet with them because they don't know about the creatures they are with. On the other hand, Hugh reaches the dungeon entrance and meets with Christopher and the researchers. He loses all hope as he hears that the research team has been found on the 40th floor, because even if he sends all the adventurers in the town, they won't be able to rescue them. Christopher also says that he can't risk going into the dungeon now, and Hugh agrees with his decision. In this situation, he can only pray that Abel and others are safe wherever they are. Meanwhile, Clive and his men are not safe at all. They are under attack from the unknown enemies, and while some of them hide under barriers, the rest are hunted down by balls of purple hellfire. Soon, the attackers come into light, and on seeing them, Clive realizes that they are devils, which is a species of monsters different from demons. He has only read about them in books, but he knows how scary they can be. However, the adventurers who are not under the protection of the barriers decide to fight the devils, and they get destroyed quickly. By the time Abel and others reach there, only Clive and a handful of his men are alive. Lyhia and the senior mage identify the devils, and they panic because devils are said to be monsters immune to magic and much stronger to humans. She thinks they can't win against them, but the mage decides to fight them without worrying about the results. On his command, the mages launch an all-out attack on the devils, seriously injuring them. Lyhia is surprised to see magic actually hurting devils, and the old mage tells her that it was never verified that they are immune to magic, and that was just a speculation. He then tells the mages to attack the devils again, but realizes that they will run out of mana before the enemies are defeated. Just then, Abel spots a boss monster among the devils, and he realizes that they need to defeat him if they want to take care of the situation for good. After a couple more rounds, the mages run out of magic, and then Abel decides to charge ahead with his party. Warren blocks the attacks of the devils while the others manage to quickly take them down. Thanks to their teamwork, they defeat a lot of devils, but then Lynn runs out of magic power and Lyhia and Warren have to cover for her. Abel notices that only 6 devils are left, but the boss monster is among them. Lyhia remarks that he might be a demon prince who will awaken into a demon lord one day. Abel asks if she is sure, and she tells him that different colored eyes are a symbol of demon princes, and only heroes have been able to defeat them in the past. Abel decides to take his chances and walks ahead, telling Lyhia that he plans to defeat all other devils even if he can't take down the boss. He tells Lyhia not to lose hope because miracles can always happen, and then the demons start attacking him. He takes down a couple of them quickly, but then the demon prince suddenly attacks his party members to blow them away from the battlefield. He walks towards Abel for a one-on-one, and his speed alone is enough to scare Abel. The demon prince pushes him aside with a single swing of his sword and then gets close to him again. Suddenly, Clive and his group attack him, but their magic doesn't do any damage against the demon prince. Instead, its minions begin to shoot projectiles at them, destroying their shields, forcing them to run away. Abel decides to risk it all by using a skill that allows him to dodge the enemy attack at super speed. He manages to parry the demon prince's sword and get a chance to attack him, but the demon prince dodges it and strikes his shoulder. Abel falls to the ground, unable to move, and the demon prince lifts up his sword to finish him. Lyhia cries out in fear of losing Abel, but then suddenly, Ryou arrives to save the day, breaking through the roof of the 40th floor. Everyone is surprised to see him, and Ryou asks Abel if he is injured. He makes a couple jokes about it and says that they should return home because everyone is worried about him. Abel, still unable to believe that Ryou came to rescue him, says that they can't return because of the strong enemy in front of them, and Ryou says he will deal with it. Abel panics as he explains that the enemy is a demon prince, and Ryou says that it is a baby demon lord, which explains why it is so weak. No one is able to understand what is even going on in Ryou's brain as he walks towards the devils. The lackey devils at the back try to attack him, but he cancels their projectiles with icicle lances. He then creates a water jet behind them to instantly remove their heads, and then gets face to face with the demon prince. Ryou draws his sword, telling the demon prince that they should get it over with quickly because he doesn't have all day. A few minutes ago, as Natalie found that Abel and others were stuck on the 40th floor of the dungeon, she ran to find Ryou immediately. He was not in his dorm room, and his roommates told her that she should find him in the North Side Library. She didn't even know where North was, but once she got the directions from the boys, she ran to find Ryou. Luckily, she met him on the way and immediately asked him to head over to the dungeon because Abel and his team were in danger. Ryou decided to get the details on the way, and immediately put her in a carriage made of ice. As he dragged the carriage to the dungeon gate, he learned about the disappearances in the dungeon, but he was curious about why Natalie approached him. She told him that Abel had asked her to contact him in case she needed help, and he was not around. Ryou understood the assignment immediately and rushed towards the dungeon gate. The guards told him that no one was allowed inside, but he just created ice walls to cut them off, easily entering inside. After that, he decided that it would take too long to reach the 40th floor using the normal method, so he used his water jets to carve a way to his destination quickly instead. Now, he is standing in front of the Demon Prince, asking him to make the first move. He takes his stance, and as the Demon Prince attacks him, Ryou quickly moves to the side and hacks his neck cleanly. He thinks that the monster was quite slow, but at least the job is over quickly. However, the Demon Prince just picks his head back up like a gigachad and attaches it in its place. Ryou thinks he might be troublesome to deal with, but he decides to see just how much the monster can regenerate. He instantly creates hundreds of water jets to chop him up into tiny pieces, and one of the water jets destroys his magic stone, turning him into dust. Abel is shocked to see that Ryou just casually demolished a Demon Prince. He thanks him for saving all of them, and the peaked nonchalant Ryou asks him to repay that debt by treating him to dinner tonight. Abel tells him that he will treat him for the entire week, and Ryou is glad to hear that. Just then, Lihia comes there and hugs Abel tightly, while Warren carries the unconscious Rin to safety. The senior mage also comes there to thank Ryou for helping them, and he replies that he was lucky to have made it here in time. He then notices that a lot of people already died before he came, and Abel tells him that they should harvest the magic stones from the devils and use the money from that to support the families of the dead people. Ryou likes the idea, but then he focuses on the monsters called devils. Abel tells him that everyone here saw them for the first time because they have not approached humans in centuries. Ryou is curious about the difference between demons and devils now, but he decides to think about it later. He says that when he came here, he sensed a strange magic field around the place that vanished when he defeated the boss. The old mage says that it must be the protective barrier that was blocking anyone from entering or exiting the zone. Ryou then tells him that while he was on the 39th floor, he used a spell to scan the nearby area and found something strange near the stairs. He suggests that they check it on their way back because it might be connected to this incident, and everyone agrees with him. But before that, they extract the magic stones from the devils that are quite dark in color, and even the senior mage is seeing them for the first time. Lihia says that there are no magic stones from devils even in the museums and libraries maintained by the church. The senior mage adds that devils are supposed to have space-time magic because they always appear out of nowhere, and Ryou begins to think that something is missing in all this information. Somewhere in another dungeon, a party led by the hero Roman finds a dark altar, and they use it to summon the Demon Lord. However, instead of a Demon Lord, the demoness Leonore arrives there. She is quite surprised to see humans who think she is the Demon Lord, and when she hears about Roman being the hero who will defeat the Demon Lord, she gets hopeful that he will be really strong. She decides to fight him, but the fight ends in a split second with the hero skewered on her sword. Leonore is bored out of her mind, so she immediately goes next to the altar and takes the black stone on top of it as her loot. The other adventurers are too scared to fight her, and she tells them to help the hero instead because they can still save him. The adventurers obey her and heal the hero, who curses Leonore, still calling her the Demon Lord. She tells him that she is not the Demon Lord, but actually someone much more powerful than him. She tells Roman that his party might be able to defeat the current Demon Lord, but that doesn't make him strong enough to challenge her. She begins talking about how she met a human named Ryou who was equally strong as her, and tells the hero to become 1,000 times stronger if he wants to reach his level before vanishing through a portal. Back in Ryou's dungeon, they find a cracked black sphere just like the one Leonore took away in her dungeon. Everyone is curious about it, but they can't find any information on it, so the old mage decides to take it to the surface to investigate. They soon reach the surface where Hugh is glad to see that at least Abel and his party returned alive. However, he plans to talk to Ryou about his actions before anything else. He asks him what he was thinking when he trapped the guards in ice walls and headed inside the dungeon. Ryou meekly apologizes, but the old mage stands up for him, telling Hugh that if Ryou had not come in time, they would all have died. Hugh is shocked to hear this, and the old mage tells him that they can talk out the details in a tent, and he decides to thank Ryou for saving everyone's life. Later, the old mage tells Hugh that they ran into 50 devils on the 40th floor of the dungeon, and there was even a demon prince among them. Hugh is terrified just by imagining this, and he thinks that it was thanks to Abel's party that they managed to survive. The old mage tells him that Abel and others were good, but they were no match for the demon prince. However, Ryou came to their rescue at the last moment and made quick work of the demon prince. Hugh can't believe this, and the old mage says that Ryou should be their top priority right now. He wants to make sure that Ryou stays on good terms with their country. But that will be hard to do if the brain-dead nobles try to interfere in the matter. That is why, the mage suggests that they leave Ryou's name out of the official records to protect him from the nobles, and Hugh agrees. The next day, Ryou leads his roommates for some morning exercise, but they can't keep up with him. He decides to leave them in the dust and returns to the city, where the smell of curry pulls him towards a restaurant. Surprisingly, he finds Syrah there too, and while they eat, she asks him about his rank and other stuff. Once they are done eating, Ryou asks Syrah why doesn't she ever come to the guild when she is an adventurer, and she tells him that she is currently working as a swordsmanship instructor for the local knights, so she doesn't need to deal with the guild. Ryou is surprised to hear that, and Syrah tells him that she is much stronger than she looks. She then asks him to join her for a sparring session if he is free later, and Ryou accepts the offer because he was left a bit unsatisfied after his battle with the demon prince yesterday. They both go to the knights' barracks and take their stance, and then Syrah charges at him. Ryou can barely keep up with her speed, but he manages to block her attacks and even attempt to counter. Syrah is really impressed by him because no one in the knights can manage to do that, and she decides to become serious with him. She attacks him with even greater speed in round 2, and this time Ryou can't even block her attacks properly. He keeps getting pushed back, and then Syrah snaps his sword in two. Ryou accepts defeat, but then the elf baddie suddenly hugs him because she got too excited on seeing someone who could keep up with her. She keeps praising him and asks where did he learn to use the sword. Ryou tells her that the Fairy King taught him how to fight, and Syrah is really surprised to hear that because the Fairy King is more of a myth nowadays. Just then, her maid arrives there to call her for her lessons with the local lord's grandson, and Syrah decides to take her leave. She asks the maid to take good care of Ryou because he is a special person to her, and the poor girl thinks that the two of them are dating. As she escorts Ryou outside, a carriage stops in front of them, and it turns out to be Hugh, who is just returning from a meeting with the lord. He tells Ryou to get in because they have to talk about the incident the other day, and Ryou gets nervous that he will be scolded. However, Hugh tells him that the old mage filled him in on the details, and he can overlook his actions this time. However, as a nominal punishment from breaking the rules, he tells Ryou that he will have to take a mandatory quest from the guild and escort some merchants to another city. A few days later, Nils suddenly approaches Ryou in their dorm room and formally asks for his help. Ryou wants to know what is bothering him, and Nils explains that his village has put out a request for hunting monsters. He wants to take up the quest, but it is available only for D-ranked adventurers and their parties, and everyone here is E rank or lower with the exception of Ryou. Nils begs Ryou to form a temporary party with him so that they can take on the mission, and Ammon adds that they are going to face goblins and skeletons, which should not be that big of a deal. While Ito says that goblins and skeletons are not even found in the same habitat usually, Ryou suddenly starts laughing, because he has not yet fought skeletons in this world yet. He decides to take the quest just to face off against some skeletons, and the entire group immediately heads over to the guild. Hugh asks them if they are sure they want to take the quest because the village is not exactly nearby, but Nils is sure that he wants to go back home and help his people. Hugh then explains that they have already sent 2 parties to deal with the monsters. The first one was an E-rank party, and the next one was D-rank, but both of them failed. Everyone is shocked to hear that even a D-ranked party couldn't finish some goblins and skeletons, but Hugh tells them that there was another issue. He explains that the D-ranked party reported that the villagers did not cooperate with them at all, but Nils finds that odd because the people in his village are not that hostile. Hugh decides to let the boys take the job because he is from a small village himself and understands their problems. However, he warns them that the mission can be dangerous and the priest Ito will be important to their party's success because he is the only one who can heal them. He then says that Ryou has a few days left before his mandatory escort mission starts, and he can complete this quest before that. Ryou and his friends head out for the village of Cagliati the next day, and they reach it pretty quickly because their stamina has greatly increased after running each day. The villagers greet Nils and welcome him back, and Ryou is low-key surprised by that because he was almost certain that Nils was exiled from the village for being a troublemaker. While Nils is angry at his remark, he can't be mad for too long because Ryou is right about him being a troublemaker. Anyway, he leads the group to village chief Bulan, who is really glad to see him. After Nils introduces his friends to Bulan, they sit down to talk about the monster hunting quest. Bulan says that things might work better this time since Nils knows the village customs, but Nils is curious about the report of the D-rank party. He asks Bulan if the villagers really did not cooperate with the D-ranked party, and he begins the story from the point that he first spotted skeleton monsters. He says that when the E-ranked party first arrived at the village, they took the fight too deep into the eastern forest, where the villagers are forbidden to go. They would have been chased out by the villagers anyway, but they got injured and returned on their own. Once the D-ranked party came to the village, the villagers couldn't trust them anymore. They didn't even want to shelter the adventurers anymore. And that is why the D-ranked party returned empty-handed as well. Nils fully understands the villagers' reactions, but he knows that his friends can't even follow the story without some background info. However, that information is a village secret, and he tells them to wait till he gets the permission from the village council to tell them about it. Later that night, they stay at Nils' house, where his younger brother and sister welcome them. They talk about how Nils always wanted to become an adventurer as soon as he came of age, but unfortunately, their parents died, and he stayed back to support them until they were ready to live on their own. Just then, Nils returns from his meeting with the council, and he tells his friends that the council gave him the permission to share the village secrets with them. He asks them to keep it a secret too, and then begins explaining that there are two special things about their village. The first one is their guardian beast that lives in the eastern forest, and Ryou gets excited simply by hearing that. He begins to think that the guardian beast will probably get possessed by some evil god and attack them, because that is what he has seen in anime, and then he will have to fight it. Nils snaps him out of his Delulu thoughts, and then says that the second special thing about their village is the shrine. He says that the village elder will show them the shrine personally tomorrow, and they should rest for the upcoming battle. The next day, Bulan takes Ryou and his group to the area where the goblins are found. Ito and Ammon found some goblin footprints, and they think that a nest must be nearby. Just then, Ryou senses some goblins coming towards them, and Nils suggests that they kill all of them, but leave one alive, because that goblin will rush back home, and then they can wipe out the entire goblin settlement. Soon, the goblins arrive at their location, and Ryou uses his ice magic to trap them. The other boys jump at the helpless goblins and take them down, sparing just one of them so that he can rush back to his family. The boys follow him and find him talking to other goblins outside a cave. Ryou decides that they should finish the goblins outside first, and he immediately traps them in ice, giving him friends the chance to deal the finishing blows. However, as soon as they are done with the mob, the big boss of the goblins comes out. Nils and others are terrified when they find that their next opponent is a goblin general, but Ryou slams it on the ground with his ice chains and then asks Nils to finish him off. Thanks to that, they are able to easily kill the goblin general and extract his magic stone before returning to the village. In the village, the elder is waiting for them, and she is happy to learn that the boys have already taken care of the goblins. She asks them to follow her to the shrine, and Ito notices a strange trinket attached to her staff. Meanwhile, Ryou is busy thinking about the scenario in which the guardian beast gets possessed by an evil spirit and he has to fight it. But Nils tells him to stop whatever thought he has in his vile brain. As they head into the forest after that, Ito goes to the elder and asks about the trinket on her staff. He recognizes it as the crest of the Earth Mother Goddess, and the granny is impressed with his knowledge. Ryou is curious about the story, and Ito explains that once upon a time, there were 7 gods who were worshipped in this country, but now, all the churches just worship the goddess of light. The elder says that even though the other gods have been forgotten by most people, their village has worshipped the Earth Goddess for generations. She then explains that she can use healing magic as well, but unlike the priests who need incantations and spells, the followers of the Earth Goddess can cast magic even without that. Soon, they reach the cave of the guardian beast, and the elder calls him out. She tells him that she has brought Nils and the adventurers who want permission to take the mission, and Ryou gets excited to see what kind of beast will come out. A huge talking wolf comes out of the cave, and Ryou is low-key disappointed, because it doesn't look corrupted, and he won't get to fight it. The wolf looks at the boys and stops when his gaze reaches Ryou. He introduces himself as Kuzan before asking for Ryou's name, and that is a shock for Granny and Bulan, because the guardian beast doesn't give out his name to anyone. Kuzan says that his name is quite tough to pronounce for humans, so he doesn't bother telling it to them, but he could not do the same with Ryou. He explains that he is related to the fairies, and Ryou's presence is quite pleasant to him. This confuses Ryou, but also makes him realize that the Fairy King really liked him, so there must be something special about him that attracts fairies. Anyway, he thanks the wolf for his kind words, and the wolf laughs, telling the elder that she has brought a really great guest. With that, he gets to the quest and says that there are 30 skeletons trapped in the shrine along with their boss, and he has been holding them back all this time. He says that the boss is really powerful, and they need to deal with all the minions before getting to him. Everyone agrees to the plan, and Ito uses his light magic to make quick work of the skeletons. Once the normal skeletons are defeated, Ammon and Nils open the shrine gate to reveal the giant boss skeleton locked there. Ryou immediately turns their swords into ice hammers, telling them to use the hammers to damage the boss while he stops it. However, before the fight starts, he creates an ice flower high in the sky to signal Kuzan to release the seal on the gate. As the wolf releases the seal, the boss skeleton rushes out of the shrine. Ryou immediately uses his power to create a sheet of ice on the floor, causing it to slip, and then Ammon and Nils start wrecking its world with their hammers. The skeleton boss keeps slipping every time it tries to get up, and it takes a lot of time for Ammon and Nils to defeat it. Once they are done, everyone decides to check the inside of the shrine because even the elder has never gone inside herself. They find a statue of the earth goddess at the end of the cave with her holding a broken sphere in her hand. The elder remembers that the elder before her used to talk about the goddess statue, holding a shining jewel that suddenly turned black one day and then shattered. She also remembers that the guardian beast talked about the cave receiving a unique mana from another place, and thinks that something really strange is going on here that created the monsters. She decides to seal the shrine with her magic to ensure that the strange mana doesn't reach it, and no more monsters are spawned. With their mission accomplished, the boys head back to the town of Lune. On the way, they talk about how it has been almost 300 days since they became adventurers, and that means they will soon be kicked out of the dorms. Nils and Ito have already been planning for that day, and they ask Ammon and Ryou to join them once they rent out a house to live in. Ammon immediately jumps on the offer, but Ryou tells them that he needs some time to come up with an answer because he has other factors to consider. Soon after that, they return to the city, and it is time for Ryou to take up the compulsory escort job. Coincidentally, all of his roommates are also escorting the same merchant to the city of Whitnash. Ryou is happy to travel with them, and he learns from Nils that they have formed a party named Room Number 10 because his smooth brain couldn't think of anything better. Ito and Ammon have already accepted that cringe name as their fate, and Ryou doesn't really have an interest in that either. He starts talking with his friends about the long duration of their stay in Whitnash, and they tell him that their client is actually going to take part in the Open Port Festival that is held in Whitnash every 5 years. Ryou is really excited to hear about the festival, and his friends tell him that there will be many things to explore there. Soon after that, their group reaches Whitnash, and their client leads them to the inn they will all be staying at. He tells all the guards that they are free to enjoy the festival for the next 10 days, and they will head back to Lune after that. As soon as the briefing is done, Ryou and Nils race towards the food stalls, and the other two boys reluctantly follow them. They enjoy the delicious street food of Whitnash, most of which seems inspired from the food of Earth. The next day, a huge line of guests appears outside the gates of Whitnash, but because one important guest is having issues with his papers, everyone else has to wait for their turn. One of the waiting guests includes Oscar, the greatest wizard of the Debuhi Empire. He is a bit pissed at the delay already, but then his assistant asks him if he knows the reason the Emperor sent them here. Oscar is not sure about it, but he has a theory that the Emperor sent him as well as his youngest daughter, Princess Fiona, so that he could handle some nasty business without letting her know about it. The assistant understands Oscar's logic, because the Emperor is a doting parent for Fiona. She is a genius when it comes to magic and is already the commander of the court mages, and the Emperor doesn't want to show his dark and ruthless side to her. Oscar believes that the Emperor probably wants to wipe out some nobles who are trying to rebel against him, but he has no proof for that theory. However, he says that it does not matter, because his duty is just to guard Fiona from danger. Later that night, a party is organized for the nobles visiting Whitnash, and Fiona attends it along with her elder brother Conrad. While Conrad socializes with the guests and handles the diplomacy, he notices that his sister is tired, and he tells her to get some rest. Fiona gladly takes the chance to go to her room and plop on the bed, because she would rather be training with her troops instead of attending a party like this. The next day, the festival begins with a grand procession, and Ryou spots Abel sitting uncomfortably among the special guests. His friends spot him too, and then Nils begins staring at Fiona. Ito tells him that she is a princess who is way out of his league, and he should stick with the receptionist at the guild for now. Just then, Lin and other members of Abel's party arrive there, and Ryou asks them what is Abel doing among the VIPs. Lihia tells him that Abel is here as the representative of their guildmaster, who is going to arrive here the next day. Just then, Lin notices a thick-wind magic barrier protecting the special guests, and Ito is curious about it because he thought that it would just be a normal magic barrier. Lin tells him that she has heard stories about a treasure passed down the family of the Lord of Whitnash that can create a wind barrier, and she believes that the stories are actually true. Ryou is really excited to hear about a treasure that can cast magic, but Lin tells him that it is highly inefficient, so they only use it for special occasions like this. Lihia agrees, saying that protecting the high-ranking nobles and royals from different kingdoms is worth the cost, and Ryou wishes that nothing bad happens during the festival. With that, Lin turns her attention to Fiona, saying that if the commander of Debuhi's magic forces is here, her lieutenant must be here as well. Ryou is curious about this guy, and the girls begin telling him about the legends surrounding the famous Inferno magician. He is said to have burnt 1,000 soldiers with a single spell and one-shotted a wyvern among his other feats. Lihia says that they don't know how much of the rumors is true, but she doesn't want anything to do with such a dangerous man. With that, Abel's party leaves on their way, and Nils tells Ryou that should also explore the festival. Ryou agrees, but just as he is turning around, Oscar passes by right next to him. They immediately get away from each other to avoid a collision and politely apologize to each other. Ryou leaves with his friends, but Oscar keeps staring at him for a while. After that, Oscar gets busy buying snacks for the princess, because that is the mission she gave him. He is already having a hard time carrying everything through the crowd, and on top of it, his assistant orders him around, making sure that they don't forget anything from the list. On the other hand, Abel and Prince Conrad bump into each other, and Conrad remarks that Abel looks like someone he used to know. Abel tells him that he must be mistaken, and then starts talking about how he sat next to Fiona earlier. However, he is also more interested in Oscar than in the princess, but Conrad makes an excuse about spotting a friend in the crowd and leaves him abruptly. Meanwhile, Princess Fiona returns to her room and plops on the bed again. Shortly after that, Oscar and his assistant return with the snacks, and he is really exhausted because he doesn't like crowds. His assistant mentions that he almost bumped into a guy earlier, and Oscar replies that he was really fast to react, so they wouldn't have collided even if he didn't move. Fiona asks who are they talking about, and Oscar tells her about Ryou, saying that he dressed like a magician but could move like a swordsman. Anyway, he serves as Fiona's walking microwave oven and heats up the snacks for her. She is really happy about that and thanks him, calling him her teacher, but Oscar is not really comfortable with that. The next day, Ryou and his friends enjoy an archery competition, and Ammon and Ito register as participants. They try to hit targets floating over the sea, but fail to hit anything, and Ryou asks Nils if he isn't going to try it out. Nils proudly tells him that he has never touched a bow in his life. Just then Abel arrives there and starts laughing because he was also just like Nils back in the day. Ryou uses this chance to push Abel to take part in the competition, and despite not being in the mood to do so, Abel manages to hit bullseye on the farther target. Everyone erupts into cheers as soon as he hits the target, but Abel cannot bask in the glory for long enough as his party members arrive there. Lyhia smiles coldly at him, asking why did he not come to them as soon as he got free, and while he tries to talk his way out of trouble, Lin reaches over to Ryou and friends. She tells them that Abel promised to spend the day with Lyhia, but since he didn't come to see her first thing in the morning, she is livid, and now he is in trouble. With that, Lyhia drags him away and Nils starts fanboying after Abel, while Ito starts simping over Lyhia. At the same time, in Lune, Syrah is searching everywhere for Ryou. When she can't find him, she goes to the guild and asks the receptionist about him. The receptionist Nina tells her that Ryou is currently out of the city on a quest, and he is not going to return for a couple of weeks. Syrah is aghast to hear this because she really wanted to share some new information with Ryou, but now she has to wait for him to return. The next day, Ryou and Ito watch a boat race in which Nils and Ammon are participating. However, things take a turn for worse when the bully named Dan also shows up for the race, and Nils instantly picks up a fight with him. According to the rules, the players are allowed to attack each other in the second half of the race, and both Dan and Nils take full advantage of this rule. They begin attacking each other with their oars, while their partners try their best to cross the finish line first. However, the two muscleheads break their oars while fighting and snatch the oars their partners were using, right in front of the finish line. Their boats come to a standstill as the two morons duke it out, and soon, all the boats that were way behind them overtake and complete the race. Meanwhile, Nils and Dan keep fighting even after losing their weapons, and ultimately, they topple their boats and fall into the water. On the positive note, they entertain the audience the most and are given a reward for it, but they start fighting over it too. The next day, Ryou and his friends go to watch a futuristic ship that can run without sails or oars, and Hugh is there to explain that the super expensive ship runs using alchemy and magic stones that propel it using wind and water magic. After that, they head to a weapon shop, and Ito begins to look at some crossbows because he wants to add to the combat strength of their party. Soon, the shop owner comes there, and after learning that Ito wants to provide cover fire to his team from middle range, he shows him the semi-automatic crossbow that can fire arrows rapidly. Ito gladly buys the bow because it perfectly fits his needs, and then everyone returns to enjoying the festival. Later that night, Abel attends a party for the special guests as Hugh has returned home once again. He meets with Conrad and Fiona, and once they leave, he begins missing his sword even though he realizes that with the wind barrier in place, he doesn't need it. But he doesn't realize that he just jinxed himself as well as the other guests. Suddenly, another guest calls him to the side for a private chat, and at the same time, the treasure casting the wind barrier starts malfunctioning. The magicians operating at panic as the barrier is dispelled, but they don't get to worry for long as some assassins attack them and quickly end their lives. Meanwhile, Fiona also senses that something is wrong, but just as she turns around, the assassins hit the garden with a powerful attack. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.